All right, so let's talk about the ballot fraud issues that are happening in Massachusetts. Now, I don't know if you know this for sure. I sometimes wish I didn't know this information, but the entire process, the entire apparatus of the SBLC, which is the State Ballot Law Commission, it really rests on the assumption that these town clerks' certifications are reliable. But here's my issue with this. If these clerks certified potentially forged signatures, which they did, by the way, then I would also think it's right to assume that the entire certification process itself is compromised. I do. Let me put it another way for you, okay? If this process could fail in one direction, meaning that they certified potentially fraudulent signatures, which they did, then there's no logical reason it can't fail in the complete opposite direction, which is rejecting legitimate signatures. Do you see what I'm saying? That's what I'm going to show you some things today because obviously I brought some receipts with this. But honestly, here's my initial take on what's going on. And I had the entire weekend plus yesterday because I didn't film to think about this. But, you know, in my entire life, I have never seen both Democrats and a few Republicans all of a sudden work in unison together against voter fraud. Think about it. Really, they have these like forensic handwriting experts. They had detailed objections within days of the hearing. They used every single tool in the tool shed to knock both Republican candidates or Republican challengers off the ballot. Okay, that's what happened. And look, I'm not here to debate if there's fraud, if there's not fraud. There's obviously some levels of fraud, okay? Some levels of fraud. I don't know what Joe Bronski or maybe one of his colleagues or teammates were thinking, but they messed up big time. They did. They messed up big time. I am not arguing that part at all. But what I find interesting and what I'm seeing happening right now, at least from the Democrats, a lot of these people, these same exact people, these same exact institutions who for years have told us not to worry about voter ID, told us not to worry about mail-in ballot verification. That's not necessary. And they tell us that election integrity concerns are some kind of, fringe or conspiracy theory. Well, all of a sudden, as soon as they have the opportunity, all of these people are taking the moral high ground here. Could you imagine two parties this far apart on voter fraud, they decide to come together? This is what brought both the Republicans, some of them, and the Democrats, most of them, if not all of them, in Massachusetts together. This is the issue that it took. I guess nothing brings people together like a shared enemy. I don't know what it is. And again, I am not condoning or condemning the fraud, okay? Any fraud is bad, okay? 100,000%. And by the way, before I show you some of what's going on, somebody has to say this, I will. This has probably been happening forever, right? It's more than like let's be real here. Let's be realistic. This has been probably happening for decades by both parties, right? Inside of Massachusetts, outside of Massachusetts, outside of this country. It probably happens all over the place. But I will say, don't you think that it is oddly a very convenient time for this to happen? A time where Massachusetts could really need some fresh blood, where Massachusetts could really need some new leadership when the state is so broken and so divided. That's what's going on. That's really what's going on. So let me show you some of the receipts, and then I'm going to give you my ultimate opinion here, because once you learn about this process and how this process works, I think you're going to be very, very surprised. So, first of all, let me show you this. This is obviously anecdotal evidence, but I have a huge issue with the way this entire process works. Nobody should have to hire, like a lot of people, just let me set this record straight. I know there's a lot of people out here watching this, and they think that, all three candidates decided to hire a third party so that they could collect signatures because either the candidates were lazy or they didn't want to get enough signatures. Look, they have to do these things. They have to do these things because the rejection rate at the clerk's offices are completely out of control. And that is the honest to God truth. They are completely out of control. And this doesn't only happen in Massachusetts, by the way. This happens in other states as well. But the barrier to entry in Massachusetts is extremely high, meaning the barrier to get a politician on the ballot is extremely high. So if you need 10,000 signatures, the rule of thumb is like collect double. Okay, this is why I wanted to get involved in this process. I wanted to see how the sausage was made so that I could give my opinion of these things, right? I wanted to see how things are done, how the operating works. And I find it completely backwards. I do. So here's a use case example, right? We have somebody here, and I've blocked out some of the names, unlike the Massachusetts Democrats who effectively doxed, allegedly a whole bunch of people on Facebook, okay? I'm trying to do my best and just give you these examples, right? So here's somebody. They live at 7 Fox Run, number 9, okay? If you go to the voter registration rolls, this is their address. However, this is what's on the voter rolls. It's 7, the VLG, Marshfield, Massachusetts. Now, the mailing address here is 7 Fox Run. However, the registration address is 7, the VLG in Marshfield. Doesn't make any sense. That's the problem. And look at what happened to the signature. Again, I know this is anecdotal evidence, but I have a lot of it. So it's marked N. That means pretty much not good. It's not certified. It's not getting through. That's what that means, okay? That's number one. Here's another one. Same exact issue, okay? 22 Fox Run, apartment 12. You go down here, you have 22 Fox Run as the mailing address. However, the voter registration is 22 the VLG. Do these people even know this? This is a problem, okay? Not only do the candidates have to go out and do what they need to do to collect signatures, which takes time, money, and effort, not only by them, but a whole bunch of people, but also the people that are going out to sign these ballots are taking their time out of their day to go and sign them, only to be disenfranchised by a broken system. This is what is happening, and I will guarantee you that this is happening all throughout the country. I think we'll get into it in a little bit, but I think there needs to be listen, all things happen for a reason, okay? And this just shows what I'm talking about. This just shows how broken this process truly is. It is completely archaic, the way that they are doing these things. And then what happens is voters and both the candidates, they get disenfranchised. So those are two examples. Okay, we'll get to this one in a minute. Here's another one, okay? Now, this is a good one because all of these signatures are marked W. W means that it is like the wrong municipality or the wrong district. All of these signatures, I'll show you, all of these signatures were collected down here is North Attleboro. I hope you could see this. This is page 1 of 2. There's 2 pages here. Sorry about that. This is page 1 of 2. All of these signatures, 44 in total. This is for Mike Walsh, by the way. 44 signatures in total were delivered to the Attleboro clerk, and they were immediately disqualified. 44 signatures disqualified with absolutely no levels of recourse and, more importantly, no time involved to actually apply some appeal or some recourse. 44 signatures tossed in the garbage from legitimate people. This is what's going on. This is what is happening with our election system. Now, this is just the bottom of the sheet, right? It shows North Attleboro. It shows you the signatures from these people. A lot of times these are, by the way, a lot of times I've also learned that these are stamps. So you need at the very least 3 clerks to sign off on these things. Now, I'm alleging this, but I'm willing to bet that even though 3, or for this instance, 4 clerks sign this or maybe stamp this with a stamper, I'm willing to bet again, allegedly, that more than likely one clerk looks at this document. One clerk looks at this document, and one clerk is the person responsible for determining whether or not these signatures are certifiable or not. And then the other two or the other three decide to sign it, or they decide to stamp it all together. Which, why do you need even more clerks if they're not all why are we doing this if they're not all reviewing the same document? That's the point. And I understand, guys, if you're a clerk watching this, this is not necessarily any offense to you, although I am throwing some of you under the bus here. But it's the process I'm more concerned with, okay? It's the process that I'm more concerned with. So here's another one. Now, this is a good one. I think that the Democrats posted this one. I know this might be hard to see, so let me blow this up a little bit. So here we have on the left-hand side, right? On this from here over, this is one ballot from one Republican candidate. This is one signature on that ballot from one Republican candidate. It's checkmarked. That means it's certified. So the clerk certified this. Within the same exact clerk's office, another candidate files documents as well. They mark this with an N. The same exact person, the same exact address. The same thing happens down here. This candidate, remember, these are two completely separate Republican candidates. Down here, this is marked with the check mark for being certified. This over here is not, okay? This is not. Meaning that, once again, on one hand, one candidate got a certified signature. On the other hand, the same signature, the same address was not certified from the same clerk's office. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, you could say, Mike, you know what? This is like anecdotal evidence. This is just a couple rough examples, whatever it may be, right? And you would be right in saying that and thinking that. But that's on purpose, okay? That's on purpose because to make an appeal on this entire process, to make any level of appeal on this entire process, it's almost impossible, okay? It's almost impossible because when you go and you turn in the signatures, there's two things that happen. You could say on one hand, well, these candidates should have started or launched their campaigns earlier. They should have submitted their signatures earlier so that they could have potentially appealed the process. And you would be right in saying that. But there's two factors that you're not considering here. Factor number one is that clerk's offices sometimes wait until the absolute deadline, meaning you could turn in papers in February, and I think that they have to be in by June 2nd, if I'm not mistaken, and they could wait until the last week of May to go through the ballots. So at that time, if they go through those ballots, let's say at the end of May, that will not leave you, like what happened to Michael Walsh here, that won't leave you enough time to appeal. Do you see what I'm saying? That is the problem. That is a major problem. And on top of that, look at it this way. There's no audit trail of rejected signatures, right? There's no like documentation or any levels of oversight on these turned down signatures. Nobody ever knows because there is no audit trail on these signatures, right? There's no documentation to my knowledge. There's no oversight to my knowledge. Nobody audits rejected signatures. Nobody tracks rejected rates by town clerk, okay? Nobody asks why some town clerks reject signatures at dramatically higher rates than others. And remember, not all town clerks are elected, okay? Not all town clerks are elected. A good majority of them are appointed. This, in there and of itself, is, in my opinion, a problem. So, when you have a system where campaigns are essentially forced to hire paid vendors just to collect enough signatures to survive the clerk level scrutiny, nobody's asking who benefits from that arrangement. Really, the only people that actually benefit from high level of rejection rates, if you want to start a business today, try to figure out which states have the highest level of rejection rates and start a signature signing company. Okay, you'll make a fortune. You'll make millions of dollars. That's what you will make, right? And I'm not saying there's any levels of like collusion here or something like that. I am just saying that the system was built in a way that would make some levels of collusion completely invisible if it did exist. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's just what happens when you build a system with no transparency on the rejection side. I know a lot of you probably thought I was going to talk about the fraudulent signatures. Absolutely, there was fraudulent signatures. 110%. Did the other candidates outside of Ann Brensley know for certain that their signatures were fraudulent? I don't think anybody is going to be able to answer that question, regardless of the emails, regardless of this. It really, you shouldn't even need, the point of this video is that you shouldn't even need signature collectors. That's the point of this video. And also the point of this video is that the process to get on the ballot is completely broken, right? It's completely broken. On top of the process to appeal being completely broken. It is. The Democratic Party, let's say it this way. After these ballots were certified, even the ones that had fraud in them, right, or fraudulent signatures, the Democrats and the people opposing the Republican candidates had all of this time to hire people. You know, you get the SBLC involved. There's an entire process that exists. They get handwriting experts. They get this, they get that. They have almost all the time in the world. What about the other direction? What about the signatures that never made it through? What about the legitimate voter who signed the petition and got rejected because a clerk, some, again, who are appointed and not elected, they just decided something looked off, right? Maybe the N looked like an M. Maybe the S looked like an A. I don't know. I'm just giving you rough examples here. The fact is, there is no equivocal process for this, okay? There's technically the appeal mechanism, which I mentioned before, but it is an absolute joke because the window to appeal, depending on the time that the clerks review the signatures, could be 5 days. It could be 7 days. You effectively need, to sum it up, you effectively need a lawyer and a handwriting expert there when you drop these things off, if they decide to review them that day. Because you have to prove each rejected signature was valid one by one on your own dime. And remember, it's the same system that rejected them in the first place. They get to conveniently use that same system to review your appeal. So essentially, you are saying that, hey, John Doe, clerk, these were good signatures, let's review them. They're going to be the one reviewing the appeal. It's a one-way ratchet. That's what I'm trying to say. Certified signatures can be pulled from underneath you weeks or months after you submit them, and then also go through this like forensic process with expert witnesses and commission hearings and hirings and all this other stuff. But signatures that are wrongly rejected at the clerk's level, right? There's no recourse. There's no hearing. There's no forensic examiner looking at those. The town clerks who certified the Bronski signatures, and this is the point I'm trying to make here. The town clerks who did certify Bronski signatures, the potentially forged ones, right? Those clerks are the same people we are trusting to correctly reject signatures on the other end. So if the certification process is fallible enough to let fabricated signatures through, why are we treating their rejections as infallible? That's the point I'm trying to make with this video. And now I'm going to show you why. So here is a rough use case conservative example. These were Walsh's nomination papers, submitted versus certified. Now, to my knowledge, from multiple sources, Mike collected maybe 13,500, maybe 14,000, maybe up to 15,000 signatures, which maybe some of you are sitting there thinking, again, well, why did Michael Walsh need to hire, some potentially crooked, allegedly crooked signature collector? The fact remains, the rejection rates, not only in Massachusetts, but throughout the entire country, is outrageous. And it's not necessarily only the clerks. It's because of things that I showed you before, where somebody may have a mailing address, right? But their registration address, meaning if they're a registered Democrat or registered Republican, that address may not be what's on the voter rolls, okay? It may be their mailing address. It may be a different address, like I showed you. Those people will get knocked off the ballot. So imagine a condo. We have a ton of condos in Massachusetts. Imagine an entire condo complex that people are writing down their mailing address on these ballots that get disenfranchised because what's on the voter rolls doesn't match. There is a fundamental problem with the way this is working. On top of the fact that the signature collectors, there's a problem that they tried to solve, which I get, okay? I completely understand that they want to solve a problem. But the issue here is that the signature collectors are now just a symptom of the disease. You see what I'm saying? The disease is the way this entire process is working. The disease is how difficult it is to actually match the voters to the voter roll and to actually have signatures that even the clerks could actually read, on top of a multitude of other things. It is a fundamentally broken process. So Mike Walsh could have, if I was Mike, if this were me, if I was in this same position, I would have just said, listen, toss out all the ones regardless. And by the way, they did this. They tossed out all of the signatures, even credible signatures that were on the ones that either Bronski or his comrades went and had collections for. Okay. They threw them all out. So what that means is that there was potentially fraudulent signatures on the same sheet as potentially legitimate signatures. I would say, if I had collected an extra 2,000, 3,000, or 4,000 signatures, which Mike Walsh, potentially did collect here, I would say throw them all away. But what I want you to do is I want you to go back to the ones that were rejected, okay? Because there's more resources, in my opinion, and there's more opportunities in the ones that were rejected. And that's the honest to God truth. Now, the other candidates, I don't know. I don't know if they were on the cusp. I don't know if they were at 10,500. I'm not entirely sure. But it doesn't matter if it's Walsh. It doesn't matter if it's John Doe. All I'm trying to say here is that there is a fundamental problem, okay? There is a fundamental problem. And here's a use case example. So Walsh submitted 10,677 certified signatures. Now remember, this number is prior to the SBLC getting involved, the Democrats getting involved, the few Republicans getting involved and saying, hey, we think that there's fraud on these, and then they toss them all away. That's where you get this number, which is 1,021, which leaves you with 9,656 certified signatures. If I were to just add the North Attleboro signatures that were thrown out because somebody brought them to Attleboro, that would be 9,700 signatures. Do you see where I'm going with this, right? He's literally 300 signatures away from getting on the ballot. That's the point I'm trying to make. And out of the accumulation of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 rejected signatures, okay? You mean to tell me there's not 300 out of that 3,000? I think that is a statistical anomaly. All right. I just don't, I don't think it's human. I don't think it's possible. All right. I don't think it's possible. And by the way, what I'm bringing up is unilateral across both parties. Both parties should look into this issue is what I'm trying to say. And not only in Massachusetts, but throughout the country, there needs to be a fundamental reform of the way this process works. Some states do it differently. Some states you could just pay and you get on the ballot. Okay, and then you're off to the races. Massachusetts requires at least 10,000 signatures. And what I was surprised to know, because again, I don't know everything about politics, guys, okay? I know I could look at issues, I could look at policy, I could look at mandates, I could look at these things and give my my take on it, right? But in terms of signatures and having to collect, double the amount of signatures, the first time I heard that, I said, what are you talking about? I said, what the hell are you talking about? Like, how are you going to have to collect either a quarter, half, or double the amount of signatures that you already collected? It doesn't make any sense to me. And that's when I was informed that there's something called a certification rate of rejection, which ends up being very high. Now, remember, this use case example is not the best projection, okay? This is lumping up the towns that the Democrats decided to publish in a Google Drive link that were downloaded and that were gone through. So T1, T2, T3, T4, 5, and 6 are all accumulation of these towns. But in general, and by the way, that's roughly about 14 to 15 towns. Okay, it's roughly around 14 to 15 towns. And obviously, there's a lot more towns in Massachusetts than that. Doesn't necessarily mean that Mike went to all 351, okay? But there is substantially more towns than what this use case example is. So even at a theoretical, using, extrapolating the data of this 10,677, you might be wondering what this 12,620 is. That's applying the extra 15% on top, which again is me being extremely conservative, all right? It's substantially more, in my opinion, than 12,620. This is just using the metric of the 15% certification rate. So basically, using that 15% and adding it on top of the 10,677. But you roughly come out to be about 15%. I think it's probably higher than that, right? It's probably substantially higher than that. It's probably closer to 20%. So that means for every 100 signatures you collect, almost a quarter of those signatures, or 20% of those signatures, are going to get rejected for what I just showed you. Whether it be the mailing address, whether it be, your S looks like an 8, whether it be the N looks like an M, or whatever it may be. They will find any excuse in the book, which they have the right to do. They are the clerks. This is their job to reject those signatures. But again, remember, at the same time they're rejecting signatures, they approved and certified fraudulent signatures. That's the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is if they did that, there's no telling what was done on the back end when it came to the rejected signatures. That is the problem. Now, this breaks it down by estimated totals, right? So N is no such voter, bad or ineligible address. That could be just like I showed you before. There was 769 enrolled to another party. So Mike ended up having a lot of Democrats, and I know people, actually, I'm not even going to bring it up. A lot of Democrats voted for Mike. 525 Democrats, to be exact, at least based on these. Again, these are not all the signature sheets. Remember this. Based on the ones that the Democrats released, it's 525, okay? Already signed for Walsh, duplicates, 384. Ineligible signature / form. So just so you know, an ineligible form, you could literally have somebody write something on the top of the paper. I mean, maybe I'm being a little egregious with the example, but if there's like anything messed up on the form itself, they'll just toss it away. They'll toss it in the garbage. And that equates for 153. Wrong district and community. By the way, this is not including Attleboro. There was 83. So that means 83 signatures on a multitude of other ballots got tossed in the garbage because basically where they were submitted at, they didn't actually submit to the location that person lived in, if that makes sense. So that's the way that it goes. And that's what happens, by the way. So sometimes you'll have a whole group of people. Let's say you go to Market Basket, right? You'll have a whole group of people come out and sign in, let's say, Wakefield, or let's say Reading, for example, right? And some of those people signing in Reading may be signing accidentally on a Reading sheet. Well, those people end up getting disenfranchised because they signed on the, let's say they lived in Wakefield and they signed on the Reading sheet. So that signature is automatically tossed in the garbage. That's what that means. And that's what happens at, a smaller rate than the rest. But all of these things add up because in total there was, and again, this number is actually bigger because we're only using a limited data set here. That number is actually going to be larger, but it still is 1,914 rejected signatures outside of the scope of the ones that were potentially fraudulent. That is a problem. That is a problem. Okay? Now, on to this part. This is the entire voter roll, okay, for all of Massachusetts. I think all of Massachusetts, I'm pretty sure. Let me see here. Let me see if it's the entirety. Yes. Okay, it is. Maybe we're missing one. We might be missing one. But what happens here is, and you may have seen this already before I said it. The ones that are conveniently appointed just so happen to be the ones where the most people live. So you figure cities, Springfield, Worcester, Lowell, right? Lynn, Newton. They are all appointed. Meaning that people did not get these people in. They were appointed by other people. Who is the majority of the state? Okay? Take it from there. I'm not going to go any further than that, but take it from there. These people are all appointed. As a matter of fact, the majority of people are appointed. Yes, there are some elected, but the elected people are mainly only from the smaller towns. You see how it starts to get less and less and less? These people are elected, but where the majority of the voters are, they are appointed, okay? I know they're supposed to be unbiased, and I'm not claiming that they're not unbiased. What I am claiming here is that there is an issue with the way the system is working. I know it's been working like this for a long time. I'm not the be-all, end-all, but I'm saying somebody should take a look at these things. Somebody should take a look at these things because there's a problem here, okay? There is a problem here, which leads me to the end of this video, okay? Again, when it comes to fraud, alleged fraud, Joe Bronski signing them, somebody signing them, here's the issue, okay? Here's the issue with this. It costs like $25 for somebody to claim that there may have been potential fraud with a candidate, which opens up basically almost an entire investigation, okay? You could have somebody take a ballot sheet, go to their house, sign fraudulent signatures, submit it to that town, and what happens is you could have somebody else or that person say, hey, I think that there's fraud happening in this specific town. I think that you should take a look at this, right? And then there it is, right? And then there it is. And these people submitted things, or let's just use a rough example. People could submit these ballots because they're not going to have listen, guys, they're not going to have handwriting experts scrutinize tens of thousands of signatures, or if it's a ballot initiative, like hundreds of, like 100,000+ signatures, right? It's not going to happen. It's theoretically it's impossible. It's not even theoretically. It's an objective fact that is impossible to do that, right? Because of the fact that the town clerks, if they do get rejected, they could get rejected at the last minute. So if you're turning in signatures early, it doesn't really matter. It depends on where they're being turned in, depends on when the clerks want to look at them. So it doesn't give you enough ample time for an appeal. And as I said earlier, even if you do appeal, you are appealing against the people that rejected the signatures in the first place, and then they have to review your appeal. It's not like a judge is out there, some unbiased judge that's reviewing the appeal. No, the people that rejected the signatures are the ones that are issuing, are part of this appeal. So do you think that they're going to go against their rejections? It's highly unlikely. I mean, let's be real with each other here for a second. That is very, very, very unlikely. But as I said earlier, any type of fraud is bad. The missing link here is that this is the way it went. Ann Brensley decided to not submit signatures for Hanover, to my knowledge, because she got an indication that they may have been fraudulent. So she did what she did, and she said, she didn't turn these in. She let everybody know that they were potentially fraudulent, which obviously Joe Bronski or his team or whoever did it is bad, right? Then what happened is Michelle Tassinari or something like that, I think that's her name, she sent out an email to the other candidates saying that, hey, we got notice of, Hanover having potential fraud here, or there being potential fraud in general, right? To make sure that you check your ballots before you submit them, right? So the thing is, some of these people didn't use Bronski in the same areas that, let's say, another candidate used them. So for a rough example, maybe Ann Brensley used Bronski in Hanover or whatever town it was. I think it was Hanover. It doesn't necessarily mean that either the Walsh campaign or the Ann Manning Martin campaign used them for that area too. It just means that there could have been potential for the other areas. But from the timeline that they were submitted to the time, you need to remember the pace here of the timeline. I think they had 7 days or something like that, or maybe even 6, to kind of do an independent review, which leads me back to the same point that I'm trying to make. Imagine the same signature collector worked with 3/4 of the Republicans, or for that matter, let's say the same signature collector worked for 3/4 of the Democrats. Do you honestly think that every single one of those people are going to hire forensic experts and attorneys to look through those signatures? There's no way. It's just, I mean, let's be honest with ourselves here. There's no way that they are all going to do it. It's not going to happen. And I know a lot of people are like, well, this is the worst case of fraud. Yet, what's going to happen is this. Either me or people like me are going to scrutinize every single ballot signature that comes through. That's what the end game is going to be. It's going to happen to both sides. All right. It's going to happen to both sides. So the finger that people point ends up pointing right back at them. That's what, and it doesn't have to be me. It could be anybody else, right? That's what inevitably is going to happen. And that's inevitably what has to happen, because it has to happen because I think that it is also a statistical anomaly that this just so happened to occur at a time where we need new leadership the most. Okay. Not trying to be a conspiracy theorist here. I'm just saying in general, from the signature collectors, you don't know what the hell is going on. They're incentivized by getting paid per signature. A very easy fix to that would be done on an hourly rate. So instead of having the opportunity to make more money, depending on how many signatures you collect, maybe in the meantime, make a mandate or a policy that they have to charge an hourly rate or give some kind of flat fee. Okay? Do something like that. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing here. But ultimately, I think that these people need to be eliminated. That's what needs to happen. Because if you are hiring people or kids or whoever it is to go and collect signatures and they're getting paid on a per signature basis, it only opens up more invitation for something to happen. That's why I am circling back to the fact that something needs to change here. Something needs to change here. This is a massive problem for every single candidate. I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, inside of Massachusetts, just for the opportunity to make it on the ballot. This is just for the, guys, this isn't winning or losing. This is for the opportunity to make it on the ballot. People are committing, allegedly, potential fraud. Joe Bronski, somebody signed documents, potential fraud, just so candidates can make it on the damn ballot. They risked everything to just make it on the damn ballot. That's what I'm trying to say. That's how broken this system actually is. That is the fundamental problem that we're seeing here. And I'll say it again. The clerks that approve the fraudulent signatures, okay? How is it not humanly possible that nobody has thought about or nobody has talked about the rejected signatures as being infallible? Really? That's the point I'm trying to make with this video. There is a huge issue with this. This needs to be looked at. And realistically, I hope, it sucks that this happened. It sucks that this happened to the candidates, okay? It does. Because do you think that they wanted this to happen? Absolutely not. But the silver lining is that, A, more people like me are going to look more at stuff like this, okay? It's going to provide more opportunities for more people to be scrutinized about their ballot signatures, number one. Number two, it's also going to potentially provide an opportunity to change the way this archaic, draconic system is working. I don't know what the lesser of two evils is, okay? I don't have all the answers. I don't know what the right way to handle this is. But I do know we are living in 2026, okay? And having, God only knows, this is 350 some towns, clerks in all of these towns. Having all of these clerks have this much of a caseload on themselves to get signatures either certified or rejected seems a little bit out of the scope of what should be happening in 2026 to me. It really does. You could agree or disagree with me on that. And I'm not necessarily sure if a, let's say, improved system is going to be perfect either, okay? But I know that the system that we have is not perfect. It's not perfect. So again, it sucks for everybody. It sucks for everybody across the board. That's all I'm going to say about this. And maybe I'll make a follow-up video on some other things that I found in terms of, these ballot initiatives that people pay millions upon millions of dollars for just to get them rejected, only to have it circle back around again to get paid again on more signatures. Okay, that's another one. But anyway, That's my take on this. You could hate it. You could love it. I don't care. I'm just being honest with you. Fraud is happening across the board. There's no doubt about it. You would have to be a fool to think that it isn't happening. It just so happens that it happened today. That's the way it is. And now it's completely getting blown. It's completely getting blown up based on the fact of opportunity. That's what's happening. People are using this as an opportunity. Like I said earlier, and I'm not necessarily advocating against or for it because, listen, I don't know what I would do in the same situation. I have no idea. But that is what is happening here, okay? That is what is happening. And it's amazing to me that the party that doesn't think there's any levels of voter fraud all of a sudden is up in arms when it comes to voter fraud, when it's from the opposition in a state that is their majority, okay? I find it really, really, really strange, which leads me into another conversation of voter ID, of the mail-in ballots, of election integrity, things that are dirty words that these people don't like to talk about. See, here's the thing. You don't get to point the finger at people for what happened here, but also not come to find a resolution to the problem, okay? There's clearly opportunity here for both parties, okay? But there's also an opportunity to fix it. So pointing the finger is one thing, okay? But actually fixing the fundamental problem, which clearly there is one, there is clearly a fundamental problem. Let's see if they have the balls to do that. I don't think they will. I don't think that they will, based on the fact that the ambiguity, people will use it to their benefit, okay? And then the lack of ambiguity, like what happened here, people will also use that as an opportunity to their benefit. That's exactly what happened here. And this is tearing people apart. This is tearing people apart. I'm just trying to look at this in some objective way and just look at the process of what happened. A lot of people don't even know that you need to, like, I know some of you know because you're more into politics, but the majority of this state, I will guarantee you, does not know that you need to collect, 2x the amount of signatures that you need to get. I will guarantee it because of the enormous levels of rejection rates. And based on the use case that I showed you, 15%, it's probably closer to 20 or 25%, I'm willing to bet. So something needs to be done here. The signature collectors are getting rich, okay? They are making a ton of money, and it's wide open for stuff like this to happen. So point the finger with one hand, but fix it in the other if you actually want to do something. That's what should be done. That's what people should be focused on here so it doesn't happen again. That's my take on this. Again, maybe I'll cover some of the ballot initiatives and what happened with those and the people that got paid and all of this other stuff that's happening. But I don't know, guys. I really just think that this is a broken system that needs some levels of a realistic reform, more than likely from both parties, too. Both parties, this should be an opportunity for both parties to come together and fix the problem, okay? Fix the problem. Don't fix the symptom of the disease. Eradicate the disease. That's what needs to happen.